Welcome to all who are joining us after our Directions for Democracy recording with interview with the Reverend Craig Johnson from Atlanta, Georgia. I want to introduce you to the producer, director, and creator of our video, Aime Bita, a representative graduating now from the University of Minnesota, one of our representatives who happens to be Sioux Falls resident. So Amy's one of about 150 representatives we have all over the states, and happy to have them join. Amy's a good example. She plans to do pre-law, and her major is in political science and has enjoyed political issues from the beginning. But Aime exemplifies our multi-talented people. So Aime, introduce yourself, and we all appreciate the fine work you did on the Reverend Craig interview. Introduce yourself a little bit to those who have joined us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aime. I am 21 years old, and I am from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So I went to the University of Minnesota. I just graduated in May with a major in political science and a minor in sustainability studies. I'm taking 2 years off of school, and then afterwards I plan on going to law school and getting my law degree.
Aime, I have to thank you because all of our reps come with a devotion and a dedication to what we're doing. I guess you came through the handshake connection.
Yeah.
At University of Minnesota. All right, okay. Because we get sign boards for people who are interested. You can go to our website, mandatedemocracy.org, and there's a nav bar to participate and join if you please. I think we've received over 1,000 applications now through the Handshake Network. 264 universities have each vetted us and approved us to be recruiting for us, and that's been a tremendous help. And we get we've got another probably 600 through the website itself. So it's only because of reps like Aime that we're able to do this nationwide mobilization for our project, which is to empower every person, all persons, one person with universal suffrage with our online voting platform that we developed with IBM. Aime has distinguished herself from the beginning by the one trait that I've seen and valued most from hiring a lot of staff in industry, from my days in the Senate and at the White House. For the one characteristic that, as I say, is most valuable is Aime's initiative. She's offered herself and her many talents beyond what we do normally and expectedly for all of our reps, which is to advance their career and their chosen disciplines connected to building our base, of course. But Aime, tell us how you became so adept at what really is computer science and IT skills outside your majors in sustainability and political science. How did you do that?
I definitely wouldn't call it computer science. I'm not very good with numbers. I was originally an economics major, but because of how much math classes I'd have to take, I switched to poli-sci. So it's definitely not science or math, but I make YouTube videos. And so I've been doing it for like 5 or 6 years now. So like after so many videos editing, I've gotten better and better at it. So it's something that I'm really good at doing now, editing videos. And I've also invested in equipment for filming videos and editing videos. So it's just a skill that I learned through practice. I haven't taken any classes on video editing or anything like that. So it's just through practice and through trying different effects and failing a lot, but also just getting better over the years.
You should take pride in that and just demonstrates what I'm talking about. This is all on your own initiative, and you've developed those skills. They're valued. Aime is part of a team now with Sarev Gahani from George Mason, Omer Kellis from NYU, George Iskander from University of North Carolina, all talented reps and more in their field, but Aime's shown initiative across the board. She's been working on the graphics, construction, videos for our newsletters. And as I say, my hat's off again for initiative. Tell us a little bit more about the University of Minnesota Political Science Forum that you say you enjoyed so much. What is it and why did you enjoy it so much?
So when I was in college, I was in a club called Bipartisan Issues Group, and it was basically every Thursday we would meet for an hour or more. We basically would just talk about different political issues. Like some topics that we covered were immigration. We would talk about elections and just different issues that are facing the United States and also abroad. And it was just a way to get to understand different political perspectives. Even though the University of Minnesota is a very liberal college, you can tell because the college Democrats are like three times as big as college Republicans. So it's definitely a very liberal college, but in Bipartisan Issues Group, it was almost 50-50 split, Democrats and Republicans. There were libertarians. It was very diverse when it came to political thought. So that was definitely a place where I was able to understand different political issues, and also where I was able to solidify my own perspectives, because I had to fight for my opinion. Like I had to actually argue my point rather than just talking to someone and having them agree with me. So it was definitely a great place to understand other political ideas and also solidify my own political perspective.
Aime, that's a very powerful mechanism to overcome this poisonous partisanship. How can we replicate that to provide that forum for respectful dialogue, fact-based, thoughtful? As the Reverend just told us, that's so badly missing, and the divisiveness has to stop now. You have a magnificent group you're talking about right there. How can our other many universities replicate that organization that you had at University of Minnesota? Who started it? Who had to approve it? How did you get your following? How you did that and how they can do that?
I was never actually there when the club was started, but I believe the club itself is like 6 to 8 years old. It's not super old, but I also wasn't there when it had first started. So I'm not 100% sure who started it and how, but usually the process for starting a club at a university is pretty easy. At least it was for my university. The way it works at the University of Minnesota is you have to have, I think, at least 5 students to start a club, and you just basically go to the student unions and activities, and you just register your club, and as long as you have 5 members, then you get to be listed on the list of all the clubs. So that's one way where you can get new members. You're able to rent for free 1 room per week, so then you can have a space for the club to meet. So that's how it worked at the University of Minnesota. So it's basically free to start and pretty simple. I'm super into politics, so it might be from my own perspective, but I feel like this is something where if you were to start at a university and you advertised it in like the political science department or like the sociology department, where you're able to find people who are super interested in politics, you can quickly get enough people to get the group going. And as word spreads, you're going to be able to attract people even who aren't studying political science. I know for our club, the current president is studying like aerospace engineering or something. So it's not just people who are doing politics who are going to join this group. It's something where you're probably going to find enough people to get the group going, or at least to get the group started. And you just have weekly meetings. And what we did was every week we would vote on a new topic for the next week. So it was a way for people to get a say into what was being talked about, so people will come back to talk about the topics.
If we could replicate that for all demographics, ages, and labeling, this country would fly. This is being recorded. You know what? This is meant to be an epilogue, and to congratulate you for what you did for this Reverend's video. I think we ought to save this as a separate video, because I want to spread what you've been able to do, its characteristics at Minnesota. And I know our reps would be hungry to do that too, from Pepperdine to Rutgers. 264 schools, my goodness. And I'm sure many of them have strong clubs like this. NYU's got a very powerful political club, for example. The way you characterize, the way you had a dialogue, particularly in Gen Z and millennial generations, you people have to run this country. And that's the start of it, as the Reverend just told us. It has to start with dialogue and truth and facts. Shifting gears for a minute, though, just as I asked Christian a bit ago in the interview, give us your perceptions, how you look at the condition of our democracy, the condition of our politics. Christian, of course, he's been very active in HBCU community. Tell us, if you will, your notion of what your club discussed, the issues, and one thing in particular, how did you keep out the ideological zealots that want to speak one point of view? I'm sure there's nothing wrong with that. People are passionate about their issues, but for the most part, people are ready to say, I can understand your point of view, you hear mine, and let's have a discussion. But inevitably, there appear to be different estimates, but anywhere from 10% to maybe 30% of people who come up so close-minded, so zealous about an ideology. Did you have occasions like that? And the bigger question is, how would your club have handled that even if you didn't have such penetrations?
So I feel like I credit this group to me having optimism when it comes to politics, because I was able to see how you can have conversations. There wasn't a lot of times when there was yelling or bad mouthing or a lot of mean conversations. Like, it definitely was a place where people were able to talk calmly about topics that sometimes were very deep and sometimes very divisive. So I definitely feel like I'm very optimistic about our political culture, because I was in a group where I was able to talk with Republicans and they weren't judging me, but they were understanding me and listening to my opinion, and I was doing the same for them. And there was definitely a couple instances of people who, like you said, like people who were super overzealous and didn't seem to understand facts or didn't want to understand facts. And usually, because there wasn't a lot of people like that, they wouldn't get support. So they would usually just shut up. So you just let them talk, and eventually they realize what they're saying doesn't make any sense. And you keep asking them questions and they just are digging themselves into a deeper hole. So that's usually what would end up happening if someone wasn't having conversations in good faith.
Because this just demonstrates how easy it is if people will, what did the Reverend say? We're all connected. Mandate democracy is just this. We are e pluribus unum, everybody. What attracted you to mandate democracy now? And what's your view of mandate democracy's attempt to educate, empower, and enforce? Can you typify or characterize the attitude of your political science club towards the character of our government system and what needs to change, particularly on the issue of, as we discussed with the Reverend, so how impatient can we be? How can we tolerate the intolerable? What's a consensus view that you gathered from your club about the attitude towards our governance and its dysfunction?
Funny enough, one of the things that most people in our club agreed with was that our political situation needs to change and our government isn't functioning the way it's supposed to. So Democrats, Republicans, I feel like we all agree that the American government system just isn't working like it's intended to. So that was something we all agreed on. Obviously, when it comes to fixes and when it comes to solutions, that's where we differed, but that's something we definitely agreed with. And I think what drew me to mandate democracy was the aspect of wanting to change the political system, wanting to change the way that we voted, and making it bipartisan. I really like that, obviously, because I was in a bipartisan group. I really like the bipartisan nature of mandate democracy and kind of like the idea of bringing people together rather than dividing people. And I also just like the idea of a voting system that is equal to all people and doesn't favor people depending on where they're from, how old, like just making a voting system that is accessible to all people, and also getting information out to people so that when they do vote, that they're educated on issues. So that's something I was definitely drawn to when it came to mandate democracy.
And that's where the first E is not go vote. It's educated in order to vote on votes that matter, policy issues, transcend the politicians. In that regard, a lot of questioning that we receive, and maybe you have too, is this notion that the people are too stupid. People who instinctively say, I can't trust the people. They're not well enough informed. You speaking for your group or having absorbed your amazing culture there, how would you and the group have responded to that criticism of our approach, which is let the people be informed, educated on the issues and the options, and let them vote? This is not a constitutional coup. In the end, it's an empowered voice that any sensible politician ought to want to follow. How would you and your group assess and argue the proposition that the people can't grapple and be expected to vote on issues instead of a personality, a politician? Are they smart enough? Are you and I smart enough?
So I think the issue is that when it comes to when you're talking about people not being educated on policy issues, it's almost like there was like a graphic that I remember seeing where it was like a circle. People become disaffected when it comes to voting and when it comes to talking about politics. So they just stop paying attention and they stop voting. So then they are not going to be educated on the issues. So if you fix one part of the solution by making it so that people's votes actually matter, then people are actually going to be interested in wanting to learn. Like, think about how much time people spend on TikTok, how much time people spend on Instagram, just scrolling through social media. If they actually cared about voting and if their vote actually mattered, then they would take the time to educate themselves. So I think saying that people aren't educated on the policies, I think you have to understand why. And it might be just because they don't feel like, even if they tried, like that's what happens. So why do they try?
That's exactly what we found.
Positive feedback loop.
I'm glad your answer was to say it's intertwined. If people are turned off to the system and think their votes for a donkey, an elephant, or anything really don't matter in the end, things don't change enough, and they don't, then that removes their incentive to even think they want to bother. We say how wonderful that 82 million people voted for Mr. Biden and another 73 or 74 million voted for Mr. Trump. Over 100 million eligible voters did not vote at all. So none of the above won the election, because democracy will be in a death spiral if, even for emotional reasons of a person, a personality, and over-the-top frightening policies drive the vote up, what's left behind is still a disconnect between the policies running the country. And when I did this with the Senate Budget Committee, when I was up there, we actually ran this budget priorities balloting, before we had the power of blockchain to do this for everybody. And we found that right away. The Democrats, the Republicans on the Budget Committee, I helped write the concurrent resolution on the budget to give a framework for the people to grab hold of the government. We found that entirely correct, just like you're saying, Aime. Once the people felt their vote could matter and they were skeptical, say, well, you're really going to listen to me? I vote all the time and it doesn't matter. Once we gave them the information, an actual ballot that said, you decide, there's where your money's going now, here's what's being accomplished. Country, it's your wealth. How would you want to rearrange it? Once they got it through that this might make a difference, the other response was, I never knew that. Educate me some more. I want to know more. So then it was an expanding circle of participation instead of disillusion and just voting to get rid of the worst possible choice. This is unrehearsed. You and I are having a conversation like this really for the first time between us, but I'm really glad to hear that you had that sort of feedback loop, that people who are given information want more information, and that they are not ignorant. People are not ignorant. They may be ill-informed, and in this day and age, purely risking being badly misinformed because people are trying to misinform us. What are the other issues that was sort of like the top 5 in the club in recent times?
So I did this club starting fall of 2018 until the pandemic, actually, spring of 2020. I really liked when we would talk about international relations. So we talked about Syria. We also talked about China. We also talked about environmentalism. There was one day when we talked about climate change policy. The question wasn't, does climate change exist? We talked about what solutions there should be for climate change. And that was the one where I was very surprised, but for the most part, there's an agreement on climate policy. Most people agree that we should invest more in nuclear energy. I was surprised about that, but that was one where we agreed on a lot of points.
You know, we'd all be a lot better off if somebody spent $100 million to put you and the Minnesota political club instead of what some strategists believe we want to hear to get away with a vote. But thank you for doing this. And thank you, everybody who might have watched the interview and this follow-on dialogue on directions of democracy.